yet another stream. I have been doing interviews and talking to people and doing web conferences, and I'm so glad you all are here. Hit the like button if you could, please. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notifications bell. The way we do our show, for those of you who may be new, the way we do our show is that I give my opening remarks. Then from there, after I give my opening remarks, then after that, after I give my opening remarks, we do our roll call where I call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions. And the whole time, I'll be writing down your super chat questions, writing them down. And then when it comes to the second half of the show, I just start answering them. Boom, boom, boom. And we answer super chat questions until the show is over. That's how we do it here. That is how we do it here. That's how we do it. That's how we do it. So if you have a super chat question, just shoot it my way. Just send me a super chat. You give me a super chat, you will get an answer. It may not be the answer that you want to hear, but it will be an answer. There you go. There you go. There you go. Be sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button. Post this on Reddit. Post this on Twitter. Post this on Facebook. Post this on Instagram. Post this wherever videos are posted. That would be great. That would just be awesome because I would love for this community to continue to grow. We are growing right now. And a real material community is coming out of all of this. So I'm very, 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 very excited. So super chats, super chat questions, that's the second half of our show. The first half of the show is just me talking. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell so you get notified about all of this. And now I will just roll right into it. I'll just roll right into it, folks. Capitalism. The system of production for profit. The system where the banks and the factories, the big box stores, the oil wells, the means of transportation, the means of communication, the airlines, where the major centers of economic power are privately owned, where the means of production, the commanding heights of the economy are privately owned and operated in order to make profits for a small group of owners. Biden slow growth. That system is facing a big crisis. It is facing a very, very big crisis. And that crisis is unlike any other crisis capitalism has faced before. Right? During the 1960s and 70s, capitalism faced a crisis, and that crisis was a global communist revolution against it. In the 1960s and 70s, the Soviet Union was socialist, China was socialist, Vietnam was fighting for its national liberation, a number of African countries were fighting for their national liberation. There were countries all over South America where there were communist uprisings going on. And there was a crisis because revolutionary Marxism was everywhere, and the imperialists had to face it. In the 1930s, capitalism faced a global crisis. And that crisis was rooted in the fact that Henry Ford and the Taylorists in the United States and the assembly line production capitalists had figured out a method for making the economy of the United States more efficient, making production more efficient. And as a result, the market was soon glutted with products that couldn't be sold. It was a classic crisis of overproduction. But the crisis that capitalism is facing right now is unlike any other crisis. And it's unlike any other crisis for the following reason. In the 1920s and 30s, you had a big economic crisis, the Great Depression. It was caused by the fact that the way assembly lines produced products was changed. Right? The way books were published was changed. You had these very efficient book binderies where workers on an assembly line would oversee the binding of books in a huge facility called book binderies. But nowadays, we have a huge crisis brought on not by the fact that book binderies are being operated in a much more efficient way. We have a crisis brought on by the fact that today we don't have book binderies. We have machines that make books entirely by themselves. You push a button and a complete book pops out. Print on demand. Another great example. 3D printers. Another great example. Artificial intelligence. Computers can trade stocks better than humans can. Computers can play chess better than humans can. Computers are going to soon be driving cars better and safer than humans can. And all of this would be a good thing in a rational, socialist economy. All of this would be great if we had an economy that served public good. If we had an economy that served public good, the self-driving cars would result in everyone who currently has to work as a cab driver or a truck driver or a bus driver getting to do something else with their time. And all kinds of human labor would be freed up. But under capitalism, self-driving cars mean mass poverty. It means tens of millions of people out of work and their families hungry. And their spending power that they get from earning their living by driving a truck, their spending power being taken out of the economy. Under capitalism, computers being able to trade stocks more efficiently than people do means that all kinds of stock traders lose their jobs. And this is the built-in problem of capitalism. The problem of overproduction. That the capitalist is constantly driving to produce as many goods as he possibly can. But at the same time, he's looking to pay as little labor costs as he can possibly get away with. Good friend, Comrade Pella, was protesting in Times Square on Friday, yesterday. Why? Because the capitalists who own the tour bus companies in New York City have decided to replace the human beings, the tour guides who are skilled, who work very hard to get licensed and to pass a test and to learn the craft of being a tour guide. The tour guides, the skilled tour guides, have been replaced with audio recordings because the capitalists want to make more profits. Capitalism is constantly revolutionizing the means of production. But at the same time, it is constantly reducing the purchasing power of the worker. And the natural result of this is a market that is glutted with products that cannot be sold. This is the natural built-in self-destructive mechanism of capitalism. Overproduction. Overproduction. And the computer revolution has brought capitalism into a greater crisis than it has ever seen before. What Henry Ford did with the assembly lines was child's play, mere child's play, compared to what is now being done with computers and artificial intelligence and the internet and 3D printers. Henry Ford would never have dreamed of what the capitalists are now doing. He would never have been able to dream of it. And as a result, we are seeing a prolonged crisis of overproduction. A prolonged crisis of overproduction, where more and more and more we, the working people, find ourselves outcast and starving mid the wonders we have made. This is what Karl Marx wrote about in Capital. Socialism and Communism. Cells. This is what Karl Marx wrote about. This is the inevitable result of the capitalist mode of production, that they would continue to efficiently develop the means of production, to revolutionize the instruments of creating products, to more efficiently create wealth, to eliminate the worker from the production process, and soon there would be a crisis as millions and millions and millions of people who've been cast out from the economy, who are deemed to no longer be profitable for the capitalists, who are forced to become part of the reserve army of labor, the unemployed. As this happens, they would have no choice. They would have no choice but to rise up and seize control of those banks and those factories and those means of production and those oil wells and those centers of economic power, the broad masses of people who built the means of production, the broad masses of people who sold their labor power and put their sweat and their toil and their energy into the means of production, who sold their labor power to capitalists only to find the capitalists drive them out of the means of production, replace them with robots and computers. Those folks who have been outcast and pushed out of the economy, left outcast and starving amid the wonders they have made, they would have no choice but to form combinations, to mobilize into great centers of community power, into communities of solidarity, and take control of the means of production and force them to work in the interests of society overall, not in the interests of the profitable few. And a new society would have to emerge in which the means of production served public good and not profits. A new society would have to emerge in which production was carried out for social use rather than for profit. This is all what Karl Marx said in the 1840s and the 1850s and the 1860s and the 1870s. This is Karl Marx. This is Karl Marx. But then Vladimir Lenin came along. And Vladimir Lenin said, Marx was pretty much right, but he had one little detail wrong. These banks and corporations and big box stores and big corporations and cartels and trusts and syndicates based in the Western countries, they're not just going to dominate the economy of their homeland. They're not just going to dominate the United States, not just going to dominate Germany or France or Britain. No. These monopolies are going to start spreading their tentacles all over the world. Capitalism in the 1880s and the 1890s entered its monopoly stage. Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, where big corporations and big monopolies and big multinationals stretched their tentacles of influence over the world. In Marx's day, companies and countries exported products. But in Lenin's day and in our time, corporations are exported. You have the export of capital. Nigeria is the top oil producing country in Africa. Reasons for market socialism. But yet, there is mass illiteracy. A large percentage of the Nigerian population is illiterate. There is mass poverty in Nigeria. There's a very low life expectancy in Nigeria. There are many millions of people in Nigeria who are malnourished. There are many millions of people in Nigeria who don't have access to basic health care. And why is it? Why is it that the country in Africa that is the top oil-producing country on the African continent has so much poverty? They are so rich. They are creating so much wealth. They are selling more of the most valuable commodity in the global economy, petroleum, than any other African country. So why are they so poor? Well, it's because of the export of capital. Nigeria's oil is owned and developed and dominated by ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron. The Nigerian people do not control their own natural resources. Big Western monopolies do. This is the export of capital. This is capitalism in its monopoly stage. Why is it that the people of Mexico, who had been farming since long before the Aztecs, they've been growing their own food for thousands of years, why is it that they've lost their farms? And instead, they are buying their food and their agricultural products from Kraft and American agribusiness corporations. Why is that? It's because of NAFTA and the free trade agreement that allowed American agribusiness to flood Mexico with cheap goods and then put the domestic farmers out of business. The export of capital, imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage. Why? Why is it that when the British Empire went to India, it burned down all the looms and forced them to import their cloth from Britain? Why is it that Mahatma Gandhi got beaten up for boiling water? Why did Mahatma Gandhi, best books, Market Socialism, why did, LaRouche, Britain, why did Mahatma Gandhi get beaten up for boiling water? Do you know that story? That was one of Mahatma Gandhi's main protests against the British. Mahatma Gandhi was a complex, problematic figure, and he was problematic in many ways. But why did he get beaten up for boiling water? He was boiling salt water, and the British had a rule that the people of India had to buy their salt from British corporations. So by boiling water until it became salt, he was violating the law, because India was held as a captive market, and that violated the export of capital, the domination of the Indian economy by British corporations that sold their salt and had a monopoly. Why did the American colonists pour tea into the harbor? What was the Boston Tea Party about? It was about the fact that the East India Company and British corporations were trying to maintain a monopoly over the 13 colonies. This is capitalism in its monopoly stage. This is the nature of imperialism. This is the system that we live under. And Vladimir Lenin came along and he said, because of imperialism, it's going to be hard to unify the workers in America and in Germany and in France and in Britain and in other countries. It's going to be hard to bring them together because there's going to be some workers who are going to get bought off. They're going to get bought off. There's going to be stratification. There'll be some workers that'll be favored by the imperialists, and there'll be some workers who are going to be oppressed. All right. Greed and corruption. There's going to be some workers that are going to be bought off. They're going to be an aristocracy of labor. And so the revolutionary energy, it won't be in the Western capitalist countries. Rather, the revolutionary energy will come from the East. It'll be in Asia and in Africa and South America. It'll be in the developing world. It'll be countries like China, countries across the African continent, fighting for their national liberation. That will be the basis of how socialism comes into the world. Countries in the developing world will be forced to move towards socialism in order to beat back the Western imperialists. Meanwhile, in the West, there will be stratification and division of the working class, and the revolutionary energy will come from the East. And Lenin was right, and during the Cold War, there was not a revolution in the United States. There wasn't a revolution in France. There wasn't a revolution in Britain. There was almost a revolution in Germany, but it failed, and after that, you had the rise of fascism. But there was revolution in the 20th century. They had revolution in Russia, and they had revolution in China, and they had revolution in Korea, and they had revolution in Vietnam, and they had revolution in Laos, and they had revolution in Angola, and they had revolution in Zimbabwe, and they had revolution in Ethiopia, and they had revolution in Afghanistan, and they had revolution, and country after country after country said, we're not going to be kept poor any longer. The imperialists are not going to keep us from developing. We are going to take control of our own economy. We're going to control our own factories. We're going to control our own oil resources. And we are going to raise our people up from poverty. And don't let anybody ever tell you that socialism failed. That is the biggest bunch of malarkey I've ever heard. At the beginning of the 20th century, China was a dirt poor country. Now, because of socialism, China is a global superpower. China did not have a single steel mill 100 years ago. Today, China produces half of the steel in the world. China has the world's largest telecommunications manufacturer, right? At the time that Russia was a czarist capitalist country, it had barely any electricity. Outside of the cities, there was no electricity to speak of. There was mass illiteracy. But it was with the Soviet Union that the country was electrified, that the country got running water, the country got electricity, the country, COVID, socialism, that the country got a steel industry, narco-syndicalism. Is it? Writing it down. It was with the Soviet Union that they were able to develop and invent space travel. It was with the Soviet Union that in 1957, the first cell phone was patented in 1957 in the Soviet Union. It's with socialism that the AK-47 rifle, the most efficient gun, I would argue, was created. It was with socialism. It was with socialism that millions of people across the Eurasian hemisphere became raised out of poverty. Socialism electrified Egypt. It was Abdel Nasser, the Arab socialist leader, and the Soviet Union that built the Aswan Dam and electrified Egypt. It was socialism that electrified Syria and wiped out illiteracy in Syria. It's socialism that is the reason that Cuba is loved all over the world and admired for its healthcare system and sends healthcare volunteers and literacy volunteers all over the world. Cuba is just a small island, but all over the planet, people know who Fidel Castro is. People know about their achievements in healthcare and literacy and living conditions for the people. That was socialism that did that. No. Socialism has not failed. Socialism has raised 900 million people out of poverty in China. Socialism created a system that was so strong it could withstand a Nazi invasion, the Soviet Union. SWSOCCBRI, influence on USA. And yes, the Soviet Union fell. And yes, the Eastern Bloc countries fell. They had problems. They had big achievements. Romania, the communists built more hospitals than anyone else. You go to Czechoslovakia, you go to Poland. I mean, they wiped out illiteracy in these countries, but they had problems. Yes, the Soviet Union fell. Yes, the Cold War ended. And yes, socialism lost the Cold War. But the results of socialism are still alive and still around. There's still socialism in China. There's still socialism in Vietnam. There's still socialism in Cuba. There's socialism in Venezuela now. There's socialism in Bolivia. There's socialism in Nicaragua. Right? There's socialism on the Korean Peninsula. Socialism hasn't been defeated. And now we are entering a new period. We are entering a new period of the prolonged crisis of capitalism spawned by the computer revolution. Now, the capitalist system is globally in crisis because capitalism cannot handle artificial intelligence. Capitalism cannot handle 3D printers. Capitalism cannot handle the robots and the self-driving cars. Capitalism has no answer for this. The Federal Reserve cannot bail out this kind of crisis. You're not going to be able to resolve this kind of crisis with a jobs program. You're not going to be able to resolve this kind of crisis with, progressive taxation. Not going to be able to resolve this kind of crisis with some bridge digging, some bridge building, some ditch digging. The only way to resolve this crisis is for the means of production to be organized according to public good. And around the world, there are a number of countries where that is the case. In Vietnam and in China, other socialist and anti-imperialist countries. Other countries where the means of production are organized to serve public good and not profits. Countries where the state controls the economy, where the economy is planned and organized and forced to work in the interests of public good. Countries that are resisting the imperialists. They're surging ahead. Nicaragua, compare Nicaragua to Honduras and Guatemala. Nicaragua is surging ahead. China is surging ahead. Russia is surging ahead. Vietnam is surging ahead. Iran, despite all the efforts of the imperialists to crush their economy, is surging ahead. And the capitalist economic crisis is wrecking the Western world. But the countries where the means of production are controlled by society, where there might be a market sector, there might be a lot of private businesses, but at the end of the day, the state controls the means of production and forces society and the economy to work in the interests of society overall. Those countries they're doing okay. They're continuing to move ahead. Meanwhile, the West is coming to a grinding halt. The West is falling apart. Look at Britain. Looks like Britain might be falling apart pretty soon. Scotland might be breaking away from Britain. Northern Ireland, Wales, the United Kingdom may not be united for much longer. Look at here in the United States, what happened on January 6th with the Trump supporters storming the Capitol. Look what's happening in Germany. Political turmoil there. Look at France and the Yellow Vests. The capitalist world is crumbling because a society organized around profits cannot handle human innovation. Profits and the rule of profits, an economy centered around making profits for a few, cannot handle human progress. And so we must move to a higher mode of production. And that is the crisis that we are in. And the Center for Political Innovation, our website is now up, cpiusa.org. You can check out the link down below. The Center for Political Innovation, a think tank dedicated to socialism and anti-imperialism, is now in the process of bringing this message to the American people. and getting the American people to understand that their problem is not immigrants, their problem is not Islam, their problem is not people not being woke enough, their problem is not a lack of gender studies courses at universities. Their problem is not the Illuminati or the secret pedophile conspiracy or the thing high up on the thing. The problem is capitalism. The problems are rooted in the capitalist system. The problems are rooted in an economy that is organized around profits. And what we need now, more than ever, is mass socialist consciousness. People need to understand what imperialism is. People need to understand what capitalism is. And they need to understand what socialism actually means. And that is the way out of the crisis. And the role that I have chosen for myself is to play the role of educating the people with a socialist, anti-imperialist think tank, the Center for Political Innovation. And right now, good things are happening. People are stepping up every day around the country. I'm hearing from more people. People are stepping up. Younger folks who have said, you know, I'm stuck in a low-wage job. I'm miserable. I'm not happy. I'm going to help Caleb build the Center for Political Innovation. You know, I could just stay at home with my parents. Look, we have to talk about this, and this must be taken. Preserve the USSR. This must be, this must be said. Okay? AFRICOM. Expanding. Black nationalism. Socialist patriotism. Must be said. Millions of young people in the United States have been robbed of the dignity of adulthood. Let's just be real about this. Millions of young Americans have been robbed of the dignity of adulthood. Right? They don't have the economic means to live on their own, to buy their own house, to get married, to have children. They're crippled by student debt. They're stuck. They might be working one or two jobs, but they're still living with their parents. They're still struggling to make ends meet. And it's this robbing of the dignity of adulthood that has done a number on this country psychologically. Right? You look out at the country, the suicide rate, the addiction rate in the country, the hopelessness, the mental health crisis. This is a result of millions of young Americans being robbed of the dignity of adulthood, robbed of the ability to stand up and be a man or be a woman, robbed of the ability to stand before the world as an adult, forced into kind of a situation where they're almost a permanent teenager. Mixed economy. And it leads to all kinds of hopeless pessimism. It leads to all kinds of shame. All kinds of shame. All kinds of self-loathing. All kinds of feelings of being inadequate. Feelings of being not good enough. In our society, everything is considered to be individual. It's never a problem with society. It's always got to be your fault. You yourself have got to be to blame for everything. It's always an individual situation. That's how we're trained to see things. And the parents say to these 25-year-olds, 35-year-olds, 40-year-olds, you must be a loser. You must be a screw-up. When I was your age, I didn't even have a high school diploma, and I was working in a steel mill, making all kinds of money. You know, you put yourself through college, you got a degree, what's the problem? So much internalized shame. So much so much self-loathing going on, so much pain going on beneath the surface, so much negativity, so much negativity. And sometimes that pain turns into rage, turns into a violent, destructive rage. You know, the rise of the alt-right, just the seething hate you saw from those racist memes and those tiki torch carrying Richard Spencer supporters. Some of the hate that you see from these left-wing folks on the internet who aren't really interested in studying real Marxism or socialism, but just want to tear people down, just want to shame people, just want to tell nasty lies about people, just want to smear other people's reputation, just want to cancel people. What we're seeing is that shame and that self-hatred manifesting itself in a destructive, hateful, vengeful rage as an outlet for the pain that so many of these people feel. And they feel this pain, and in all this pain, they feel like they are alone. They feel like they're alone. They feel like they're the only one this is happening to. They feel like nobody else is in the situation that they are in. They feel like it must be some kind of internal flaw in them. There must be something wrong with them. That's the message they hear from their parents. That's the message they get from Netflix and from Facebook and from Twitter, from Instagram. It's all about you. You're the individual. And if things aren't going right in your life, well, Jordan Peterson says you got to clean your room. Oh, yeah, you got to clean your room now. Yeah, that's what you got to do. You didn't clean your room. If you just clean your room, why, everything will get better, don't you know? I'm Jordan Peterson. Lobsters get on top of other lobsters. And so some people are just better than others. So clean your room so you can be a better one. Oh boy, I'm Jordan Peterson. I think I know everything about communism because I read Solzhenitsyn. I read the Gulag Archipelago, and I know everything there is to know about communism. That's why I looked like a doofus in my debate with Stefan, with my debate with Slovak Zizek. I clearly don't understand communism, but millions of people are listening to me, you postmodern neo-Marxist. Yes. Well, I'm here to tell you, I, Caleb Maupin, the director of the Center for Political Innovation, a journalist, a political analyst, author of several books, writer, person who's traveled the world, person who's done some activism in my time. I am here to tell you that you are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. It's not a problem with you as an individual. You are an individual. Your life circumstances are unique to you, sure. But the problem we're facing is not you being defective. The problem we are facing is the breakdown of capitalism. The problem we are facing is society-wide. And you should be angry. You have absolutely every reason in the world to be angry. You are absolutely justified in being angry. You can be angry as you want. You can be angry. You absolutely have the right to be angry. You have the right to be angry. You have the right to be angry. Well, that anger shouldn't be at immigrant workers. Shouldn't be at women. Shouldn't be at LGBT folks. Shouldn't be at Muslims. Shouldn't be at China or Russia, Cuba or Iran. Your anger should be at the billionaire ruling class. Your anger should be at the bosses and bankers who dominate the world and see you as just a computer calculation, as just an externality in their global plot to dominate the world and keep the profits rolling in, keep themselves getting richer as the world gets poorer. And yes, you should be angry at those folks. What they're doing to you is about the same thing they do to Venezuela, right? Venezuela, a country with oil as its primary export economy, right? The USA doesn't like that, so it barricades the country. It makes it hard for them to be able to import food. It puts crippling sanctions on the country. It steals billions of dollars of Venezuela's money from European banks. It prosecutes people, and it works with the Office of Foreign Assets Control to prevent people from shipping food into Venezuela. It sends terrorists to try and overthrow the government of Venezuela. It sends, it works with extremists who try to kill the president of Venezuela with a drone. It works to cripple Venezuela's economy. It does everything it can to hurt Venezuela. And then they get on TV and they go, oh, well, Venezuela, see, that's what happens. They tried socialism, just didn't work. I'm Bill Clinton, they just tried socialism. That's what happens every time you try socialism. It just doesn't work. I'm Bill Clinton. That's what I said. I mean, it just doesn't work. Doesn't work. This is the exact same thing they're doing to you. They get rid of all the good-paying jobs. They cripple you with student debt. They deindustrialize the country. They let the infrastructure in your community crumble. They fill the airwaves with pessimistic, hopeless propaganda. And then you have a problem. You have a problem. You have a problem. And then they go, see, you're screwed up. See, you're screwed up. I mean, you yourself must be screwed up. I'm Bill Clinton. I mean, you clearly must be a screwed up person. Couldn't possibly be any of the situations that you're in. Oh boy, you yourself must be screwed up. It's the same thing. That is what they have done to you. It's the same thing that they've done to Venezuela. And they want us to blame Venezuela for its problems, as if the circumstances that the all-out economic war that they've waged against it isn't responsible. And they do the same thing. Joan of Arc. They do the same thing. They do the same thing. Right? And they say, you are just a screwed up person. You're just a screwed up generation. Right? CPC national question. You are just a screwed up person. You are just a screwed up individual. Right? You are just screwed up. You're just screwed up. What can we say? You're just screwed up. You're just a screwed up person, right? Couldn't possibly be the breakdown of capitalism. Couldn't possibly be the situation that you're in. Couldn't possibly be the economic warfare they have waged against the working class. Couldn't possibly be them letting the infrastructure of the United States crumble. No, couldn't be that. It's just you. You're screwed up. You are screwed up, they say. You are screwed up. It's all your fault. Well, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It is the breakdown of capitalism. And the Center for Political Innovation is bringing forward the way out. This is the message that communists have. Communists, we don't want to destroy the country. We don't want a big violent revolution or a civil war. No. We actually want to make your life better. In 1932, when the USA was having a Great Depression, William Z. Foster, the greatest American Marxist, ran for president of the United States. And the slogan of his 1932 presidential campaign was, "The revolutionary way out of the crisis." And in 1940, the Communist Party of the United States ran Earl Browder, their presidential candidate in 1940 for president, and they shortened the slogan to "The Way Out." That is the job of communists. We're not insurrection mongers. We're not bomb throwers. We're not advocates of political chaos. We're the ones who want to end the political chaos. We're not people who want to make your life worse. We want to make your life better. We don't want to create a crisis. We want to end a crisis. We don't want to create a violent revolution. We want to peacefully transition to socialism and prevent a violent revolution. Hear me well. We have solutions, not problems. We have solutions. And the solutions put forward by the Center for Political Innovation, the policy solutions that we as a think tank that is not aligned with any political party, the solutions that we offer are here. These are our solutions. If you want to save America from the crisis of capitalism, there are 4 emergency measures that must be taken. Emergency measure number 1, there needs to be a mass rebuilding of the country's infrastructure. The bridges need to be fixed up. The roads need to be fixed up. High-speed railway needs to be constructed to connect the South and the Midwest to the coasts. There needs to be every inch of this country having accessible Wi-Fi. Our universities need to be revamped. Our schools need to be revamped. Our water treatment facilities and our power plants need to be revamped. America needs a high-tech makeover. The population needs to be mobilized to build. There needs to be a mass program to rebuild the country. We need to hire millions of people. Millions of unemployed youth need to get a new job at a decent wage, going out to rebuild the United States of America. There needs to be a mass mobilization to rebuild the country. That is step number 1. And of course, that would cost lots of money. How do you pay for it? Step number 2, America's oil, America's coal, America's timber, America's natural gas. All of the natural resources of the United States should be the property, by right of birth, of every citizen of the United States. No more should fracking corporations, coal magnates, big oil monopolies be able to enrich themselves off our natural resources while our country falls into shambles. Oil, coal, natural gas, timber, all the natural resources of the country should be public property. Nationalization of our natural resources so they can be managed in a sustainable way. And so that the profits from our natural wealth as a country flow into the public budget. Movies. Recommend. Step number 3 would be a state monopoly on credit. A state monopoly on credit. The lending of money should no longer be done by private banks. The Federal Reserve should be done away with. Private banking should be done away with. We need local governments to have the ability to assign credit. We need state governments to have the ability to assign credit. And we need the federal government to have the ability to assign credit. The lending of money should be in the hands of the state. Okay. Racism and imperialism. Australia. First world. Haiti not. Very good. The lending of money needs to be in the hands of the state so that it can be done strategically in the interests of the country overall. The lending of money needs to be done in the interests of the country overall. If somebody wants a loan to start their business or to buy a house or whatever, it should be the community at the local, state, or federal level that determines whether or not they get that loan. Not whether a private bank can make profits from it, no, but rather if it is in the interest of the country overall. And if it is in the interest of the country, then the credit will be assigned. And when the money is paid back at interest, the interest will go into the public budget. And We'll use the money to build more hospitals and schools and things that people need. And the fourth step, the final step, would be the enactment of an economic bill of rights. An economic bill of rights. The right to health care, the right to education, the right to a job. Roosevelt, many consider him to be our greatest president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he proposed an economic bill of rights in his final State of the Union speech, and we should enact that. There should be an economic bill of rights. Those 4 steps, those 4 measures would rescue the country from the economic crisis. If those 4 steps were taken, the USA would no longer be in an economic crisis. Rather, the United States would start to speed forward economically. But furthermore, there are 2 other crises that need to be addressed. The issue of climate change. Climate change is hanging over our heads. Right? The weather is erratic. People are suffering. It's time to move on from fossil fuels. It's time to move on from fossil fuels. Haiti. On the ground. And in order to get beyond fossil fuels, we need fusion energy. We need fusion energy. Russia has called for an international joint effort to bring fusion energy. China has called for an international joint effort to bring fusion energy. Iran is working on fusion energy. India is working on fusion energy. South Africa is working on fusion energy. There are American labs working on fusion energy. Now is the time for all of the great scientists around the world working on this project to unite in one place. We need to construct Fusion City. A new international territory needs to be created in the heartland of the United States. Fusion City must be built. Fusion City must be built. Fusion City now. Fusion City now. We need an emergency project, something like the Manhattan Project, in the center of the United States, an international territory like the UN, where Russian scientists, Chinese scientists, American scientists, Indian scientists, South African scientists, Iranian scientists, Cuban scientists, Vietnamese scientists, Argentine scientists, Chilean scientists, all the greatest scientists of the world are in one location with all the funding that they could ever want to work day and night to get us off of fossil fuels. An emergency project to save humanity from fossil fuels and from climate change. Fusion City must be constructed. Fusion City must be constructed. We must demand the creation of Fusion City. The right wing wants to deny global warming, say it's all a big hoax. The left wing says, oh, global warming means we all have to be poorer and we have to reduce the human population. There's just too many people and there's too much stuff. No, the answer is science. The answer is human progress. Fusion City must be built. We must build Fusion City. Fusion City must be built in the heartland of America. Fusion City now. Furthermore, we have a problem on our border. Millions of people from Guatemala, from Honduras, from El Salvador are desperately poor. They're suffering at the hands of drug cartels. They're suffering from not having running water, from not having literacy. Some of them don't even speak, Spanish, but rather speak the indigenous languages they've spoken for thousands of years. These people are economically destitute, they're suffering, they're poor, and they're starving. And as a result, they're fleeing to the United States, and there's a crisis on the border. Right? They find dead bodies along the U.S. border every single day. Did you know that? They find dead bodies on the border. There are migrant children that are turning up. It is a crisis on the border. What is the solution to the crisis on the border? Are we just going to build a big, giant wall? We are going to build a big, beautiful wall. Is that going to solve the problem? No. We're going to have ICE tear down people's doors and kick down doors and terrorize people. Is that going to solve the problem? No. No. In fact, the more terrorized you make the immigrant community, the more afraid you make immigrant communities to call the police, the harder you make it to cross the border, the more groups like MS-13 become emboldened, the more they get paid to smuggle people across, the more that they are able to operate in immigrant communities and terrorize people, communities that live in the shadows. No. Trumpian solutions are only going to make the problem worse. However, liberals, they offer more compassion. Kamala Harris gets up there and tells heart-wrenching tales. And they care, and they care, and they care. They say, but what are they doing? How are they going to fix the problem? I get it. You care. You care so much. Do not come, says Kamala Harris. Do not come. I get it that you care. But what are you going to do to solve the problem? What are you going to do to solve the problem? Big giant wall is not going to solve the problem. Plucking people's heartstrings and crying and telling people you care is not going to solve the problem. What are you going to do to solve the problem? Well, there is an answer. And that answer is called the Sandino-Zapata Economic Corridor. It is an urgent matter of national security for the United States that there be a mass program of economic development for for Central America. Central America must have mass economic development. The government of the United States should join a joint effort with the government of Nicaragua, the government of Mexico, and China to bring running water, bring electricity, bring jobs, bring schools, bring housing, bring economic opportunities to the people of that region. Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador urgently need economic development. We must construct the Sandino-Zapata Economic Corridor. The Sandino-Zapata Economic Corridor must be constructed. China would be excited to build high-speed railway. Nicaragua would be very, very excited to bring new economic opportunities up and down Central America. The government of Mexico is very excited to work on this. We need the government of the United States to join in. There'll be lots of jobs for people in Texas. There'll be lots of jobs for people in Arizona. There'll be lots of jobs for people in New Mexico. There'll be lots of jobs for people in Southern California. There'll be lots of jobs for people in Mexico, jobs for people in El Salvador, jobs for people in Nicaragua, jobs for people in Guatemala and Honduras. There needs to be an emergency economic corridor of vast construction created in Central America in order to end the desperate conditions that are giving rise to drug gangs and narco gangs and terrorism and mass poverty and desperation. It is a matter of economic security. And no, the market is not going to do this. Right? The market is not going to solve the problem. Libertarians believe that the magical market solves the problem. No. Just like the market is not solving the problem of infrastructure, just like the market is not solving the problem of mass unemployment and a crumbling United States, just like the market isn't solving the problem of fossil fuels and getting beyond them and fusion energy, the market, the so-called free market, doesn't have the answer. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Strength must return to politics. Popular will and popular power must swing into motion and force the economy to serve public good and not profits. Popular power, popular will is the only way out of this crisis. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Popular power, democratic mobilization of the people, the enactment of popular will. We need a government of action to fight for working families right now. Right now. Those of you who are parents, are very aware of the fact that if it was cold in the wintertime and you sent your child to school without proper clothes, you would go to jail. Why might you go to jail? For the crime of criminal neglect. Criminal neglect. The government of the United States is guilty of criminal neglect. It has left people cold in the wintertime. It has left people thirsty in summertime. It's left a generation without hope. It's created a prison industrial complex. It's presiding over a declining birth rate, a rising suicide rate. The government of the United States is at this moment guilty of criminal neglect. They're fired. They're done. They need to be replaced with more competent actors, with people who understand their responsibility. Folks, statecraft, the art of government, is responsible for almost all of the greatest achievements in human history. The free market did not paint the Sistine Chapel. The free market did not create the music of Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. The free market did not defeat the Nazis. The free market did not create space travel. So many of the great achievements of human history, almost all of them, are the result of competent leadership. Leadership and government that took its job seriously. It wasn't a puppet of the rich. It wasn't weak and pathetic, but mobilized to take action to get things done. And in Russia, and in China, and in Cuba, and in Venezuela, and in Iran, and in the anti-imperialist countries, they have governments that take their job seriously. Governments that bring people in to the process. Governments that mobilize. I've seen it, folks. The government of Iran would not be in power for 2 seconds if it weren't for a well-organized network of people that have their back. The Basij councils, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, those folks are lined up, and the Iranian government stays in power because there is a mass movement of people mobilized behind it to carry out its goals. I've been to Venezuela, and I've seen the Bolivarian circles, these community assemblies that keep the government intact. That's how they've been able to withstand all the attacks on them, all the attacks on them. They've withstood it because they have this well-organized population. Nicaragua, they've got the Citizens' Power Councils. In China, the Communist Party has 90 million members. They've got somebody in every apartment building, every neighborhood. That's statecraft. That's serious government. Our government wants us to be stupid. Our government wants us to not even be able to find our own country on a map. It is something really special. Here in the United States, we can't find our own country on a map. We laugh about it. We're so stupid. We can't find our own country on a map. But we're free, right? We're supposed to be free. But we're told that all the people in North Korea, all the people in China, all the people in Iran, all the people in Cuba and Venezuela and Vietnam, they're all brainwashed. Oh, they're all brainwashed. The government does this magic brainwashing on them. It goes do 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 do, and they have no freedom and they can't think about anything. They're just so brainwashed. But it's funny because I've been to Iran. I've been to Venezuela. I've traveled, been to Russia. You know what? They can all find their country on a map. They can find our country on a map also. You know, in the United States, people go around saying that this is the greatest country in the world. 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 And you say, how is the United States the greatest country in the world? I mean, you're saying we have the richest people. I mean, how is the United... And they look at you and you say, you don't think America's the greatest country in the world? You must be brainwashed because everybody knows that America's the greatest country in the world. You know, you go to Russia, you don't hear people saying Russia's the greatest country in the world. They're proud of their country. They're proud of its achievements. You go to Iran, people don't go around saying Iran's the greatest country in the world, but they are proud of its achievements, right? U.S. society is rather judgmental and arrogant. Capitalists class getting dumber. Bill of Rights. America. Go around the world, people that are supposedly brainwashed, people that are supposedly unfree, they are a lot more in touch with reality when it comes to international issues than we are. They're much more tuned in to world events and what's going on. And they're far, far, far more involved in the process of governing their homeland. So we really need to rethink a lot of what the American government and the American system has told us, especially what they've told us about communism and capitalism. We really need to rethink it because the situation is getting more desperate. Folks, the danger of a new world war was on the horizon. I mean, this is just a reality. I end every live stream with the paragraph. I think we're just going to start calling it the paragraph. All right, it's from a statement, one of the last, I think it was the final statement of Mao Zedong. We should all, I have memorized it. Years ago, I memorized the paragraph. But there's a reason. There's a reason that I memorized the paragraph. Because it's just as true today, in fact, even more true today, than when it was written. The paragraph that I end this live streams with every time, I'm going to say it now, even though I'm not going to, Oliver Cromwell. Okay. Very good question. Oliver Cromwell. Parallel with USA. The paragraph goes like this. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. That's the paragraph. That's how I end every live stream. I'm not ending right now. I'm just repeating it for a point. We should all know this paragraph. It's not that long. It's not that hard to memorize. But the danger of a new world war still exists. Look, they're on the brink of sending troops to Haiti. We're going to get into that in the Q&A. The danger of a new world war still exists. The people of all countries must get prepared. But revolution is the main trend in the world today. What is revolution? What is a revolution? Well, the word revolution was originally a scientific term. Copernicus discovered that the earth was not the center of the universe, that it was revolving around the sun. Copernicus discovered that, and those who refused to accept the idea that the earth was the center of the universe, but instead believed that the earth was revolving, they were called revolutionaries. Those who refused to accept the limits on human intelligence and human creativity, those who used their brain power to push forward human civilization, those folks are revolutionaries. Revolutionaries are those who use science and reason to unleash human creativity, to push humanity toward a higher state of being. Revolutionaries are city builders, and we represent the city building tendency in human history. We are revolutionaries. Somos los revolucionarios. We are revolutionaries. And we are revolutionaries because we are city builders. We are the city building tendency. We are revolutionaries. We are city builders. And yes, the danger of a horrendously destructive world war still exists. The people of all countries, including this country, must get prepared. But revolution is the main trend in the world today. And on that note, folks, names and locations. I will call you out as I see you, names and locations. Who's with us tonight? We are now doing our roll call. Who's with us? Names and locations, and then we'll start answering these super chats. Names and locations. I see Mickey Mouse with his fist. AJQK, thank you for the super chat. Natalie, good friend of the program. Jenny Lynn, good friend of the program. Chaya, at her parents' house in South Hampshire. Very, very good. Jeff in Studio City, California. Tara Hoot. Io Hillary in New York City, good friend of the show. Very good. Pirate Alex, Cleveland Pirate Alex, good stuff. Chicago, Springfield, Missouri. Miguel in Puerto Rico. Clyde Bank, Cleveland, Ohio. Calgary, Canada. Hatesburg, Mississippi. Arturo in Alaska. Daniel in Mexico. Donald Shantz, shout out to you, good friend of the show. Donald's out there in Jersey. Fred in Alameda. Jeremy, North Carolina. Los Angeles. KCMO, Kansas City, Missouri. Going to Kansas City, here I come. Right? Ryan in Oakland. Terrence, Malaysia. Michael Rostarucci in Ithaca, New York. So there you go. Ellie, East Harlem. Nadia, very good. Welcome, Nadia. Hugo Chavez from Heaven, Borisville, North Carolina. Joanne in the Netherlands. Detroit. Lockport, New York. Southern California. Auckland, New Zealand. Valencia, Venezuela. Chicago. Joe Biden in the Washington, D.C. Ryan in St. George, Utah. Los Angeles. Canberra, Australia. Santa Clarita, California. Corpus Christi, Texas. Brazil. Nashville. Kieran from San Diego. Tony from Tasmania, Venezuela. Vinicius from Brazil. Norway. Well, it's either my way or Norway. I'm just kidding. Belize, California. Pomona, California. New Jersey. Palestinian and Syrian American comrade. Welcome. Right? Patty in Joshua Tree. Shout out to you, Patty. Wow, there you go. Matt from Los Angeles. Matt from Laos, I'm sorry. Morning from London. Balthazar in Oakland. Wyoming. Wyoming. What does it mean to Wyoming? Right? If you're Wyoming, you must be doing something. What does it mean to Wyoming? I've always wondered that. What's Wyoming? Is that a state where people Wyoming? Is in the state of Wyoming? I mean, I'm overthinking this, I'm sure. It's just whatever. Nowhere notable. Red Illuminati. North Carolina. Adelaide, Australia. Bermuda. Costa Rica. A galaxy far away. Tristan in Maryland. Good friend of the show. Tristan is awesome. North Carolina. Hong Kong. Very good. Sydney, Australia. Linwood, California. Northern Michigan. Yoga. All right. Who else is with us tonight? Anybody else? Shout out to you, names and locations. Kendall in San Diego. Howdy, Kendall. Howdy, howdy, Kendall, Kendall. Howdy, 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 howdy. All right. Very, very good. Very, very, very good. Folks, just a few business items. Herb Bryant in Tampa, Florida, USA. Very good. Peace from London, England. Kolkata, India. Welcome, welcome. John in Houston. Seattle. SoCal. Orange Duke from SoCal. Very, very, very good. Very, 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 very good. All right. All righty. Okay, Scott in Massachusetts. Justin Simons in Los Angeles. I think you can be a mod, Justin. I think you deserve moderator privileges. Justin Simons is a good friend of the program. Very, very good. So there you go. Yes. All right. So just a few business items to just clear up here. Just a few things before we get to the super chat. Thing number one. If you don't have a copy of the book BreadTube Serves Imperialism, you really ought to get it now. It is the #1 new release in the category of anarchism on Amazon.com. That is a huge win for our community. It is a huge win for our community. The BreadTube book is selling like hotcakes, and the BreadTube book is like an advertisement for the Center for Political Innovation. It has our 4-point plan in it. It has, I have a note on my own political development at the end. It is like an ad directed at BreadTube people for our community and for our ideology. We take the BreadTube viewpoint apart piece by piece by piece. And the fact that people are buying it like hotcakes, the fact that it is not only the #1 new release on Amazon, okay, which it is. It's the #1 new release in anarchism. Let me be clear, not overall, right? It's like 14,000 overall, but it's in the category of anarchism. It is the #1 new release. On top of that, it's been hovering around the top 10 overall in anarchism, right? Right now, I think last time I checked, it was #4. It was the 4th top-selling book in the category of anarchism. We are in the same, we are up there with Jack Probasic or Probisic or whatever his name is, the guy who wrote this hit piece, this scary piece about Antifa that all the Fox News people are buying. It's in the same category as anarchism. Our book is up there with Jack Probasic or Probisic, whatever the hell his name is. Our book, we are outselling Ted Kaczynski, right? The Unabomber Manifesto or whatever. We are outselling it right now, right? And we didn't even blow anybody up. We don't believe in violence. We're outselling it. BreadTube Serves Imperialism is it at this point. It is #4 overall in the topic of anarchism, right? It is like number 15 or number 10 or number 26. It keeps hovering around, but it's one of the top books in the category of communism too. I've never seen anything like this. I have never seen anything like this. People are buying it every day. I check Amazon and I've sold a few more copies. It is crazy. It is crazy. That book is selling like crazy. Max Blumenthal plugged it just recently. Max Blumenthal, he plugged a section of it. Vosh is having, temper tantrums and meltdowns about it on a daily basis. He found some section about it, and he's just having little temper tantrums and advertising it to his community, right? All the bread tubers are talking about it, and they're all like hate buying it and then reading it and becoming confused, and it's something special. So, the BreadTube Serves Imperialism. I just went on with Peter Coffin about it. I went on with Praise of Folly podcast about it yesterday. I've got some other podcasts lined up, and we are kicking ass. Our community is kicking ass and taking names. Now, the video from the retreat is going to be up pretty soon. I'm in the process of editing it. Editing the video of the recent. There'll be 2 very good classes that I gave in Saxton, Pennsylvania. That'll be going up on the internet. Your thoughts on No Longer Human? Never heard of it, Boris. There'll be 2 great lectures there. There's also going to be a presentation from Chris Halulli and a presentation from Don Quarter from the same gathering in Pennsylvania. That's going to go up on the web. It's going to be awesome. That's going to be great. So keep your eye out for that. Yeah, a lot of great stuff is happening. There's some people doing volunteer outreach. There's an outreach team being formed in New York City as we speak. They're hitting the streets. They're hitting the streets every day. To promote the Center for Political Innovation. They're out on the streets. The CPI, the Center for Political Innovation website, is now live. CPIUSA.org. I mean, this is happening. Okay, a lot of things are happening all at once, right? We are exploding onto the scene. So I need you to get involved in it. Send an email. Get involved in the Center for Political Innovation. This is happening. This is for real happening. We are building a constructive socialist anti-imperialist movement. We're doing it. So, the think tank and the suit socialism, it's happening. It's happening. So if you want to get involved, just, go to the CPI website and fill out the form that you want to get involved. And do it, because it needs to be done. We need you. We need you more than ever. And we need you more than ever. If you want to give a donation, that would be great. If you want to actually get involved in your area. Look, somebody called me. We have the manual. The CPI manual, We Are City Builders. It is designed for educational purposes. There is a woman in Chicago who ordered like 50 copies of it 2 weeks ago. And I sent them to her. There was somebody else. There's a group of people in Texas. And thank you, Javier, for your super chat. Thank you very much, Javier. There's a group of people in Texas, of 5 people who are out there in Texas, and they're having regular classes with the CPI manual, learning about these concepts and what it means, right? The outreach team here in New York, every day they have a study session, in addition to going out on the streets and spreading the revolutionary message and promoting the CPI and urging people to, talking about student debt and talking about the wars. They are sitting down and studying the manual every day. This is a mass movement. I mean, Center for Political Innovation, We Are City Builders, the city building tendency, suit socialism. This is exploding. This is a mass movement. This is like something people have never seen before. So we need you to get involved in it, right? Do your part. Step up and get involved. We just had a great Zoom call today. We had a great web conference on patriotic socialism. It's happening. This is a phenomenon that is happening. This is a phenomenon that is taking place. So I just want you all to know about it. And I want you all to know that we did this. I didn't do this by myself. We did this. As a community, we did this. We did this as a community. We are making this happen, right? What force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. Drops of water turn a mill. Right? We're making it happen. We are doing it. It is happening before my eyes. But it couldn't happen at a better time, because it's July and we're heading toward August. And as I warned you earlier today, the guns of August might blaze, right? We can stop the guns of August. The danger of a new world war is hanging over our heads. So I just wanted to get all those business announcements out there. Check out the new book. Check out the website. And now let's start going through these super chats. Biden, slow growth. Well, Biden is a very big promoter of lower forms of energy. Rather than pushing fusion energy as the answer to climate change, Joe Biden is pushing the notion that windmills and solar panels are the answer to climate change, which they are not. They are not. I didn't agree with a lot of what Michael Moore said in the documentary he produced, but he exposed how we are not going to be saved from climate change by windmills. We're not going to be saved from climate change by solar panels. Joe Biden seems to think that we are. Joe Biden also, he seems to favor basically favor, a lot of the kind of, regulations that kind of slow things down. Joe Biden, he very much, he wants to kind of slow down. Again, there's a fight in the ruling class. He's with that old Eastern establishment. He's, old, tired, sleepy Joe, and that we all got to learn to have less. And it's Jimmy Carter putting on his sweater and, telling us to, and that's Joe Biden, right? And that's the administration, the slow growthers. They're not excited about fusion energy. They're not excited about the future. They're tired. They're pessimistic. For God's sakes, wear a mask. Just wear a mask. Come on, man. Wear a mask. I'm Joe Biden. Anyway, next question. How would socialism and communism help incels? That is an interesting question. Well, I would argue that the incel phenomenon is it is a result of a number of things. One of the things it is a result of is the commercialization of dating, right? Dating and dating apps and dating websites has been turned into a way to make money, right? And as a result of that, it's gotten distorted, right? You know, if you don't like the face, you just swipe, 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 right? And sex and romance has become commodified. People have this bizarre fictional idea based on Hollywood movies of what their sex and romantic life is going to be. I think socialism would correct that and make love and romantic life much more healthy, much more natural. Instead of turning it into a way to make money, instead of commodifying everything, right? Instead of making everything, everything almost a financial transaction. Look, what do they say when someone's dating? When someone's no longer married or no longer in a serious relationship, what do they say? What is the expression? They say they're on the market. You ever heard that before? They're on the market. They're on the market. Thoughts on jobs that aren't involved in production, arts, right? Jobs not in production, arts, science, etc. And that we have very much turned romance and sex into this commodified thing. And that the incel phenomenon, much like many other things, is rooted in that. I would also say that one of the other problems is that a lot of these young men that get into that incel delusion, it's a result of social isolation, right? They're alone. They don't have very good social skills. They are resentful of women because they feel like they blame women for all their problems. And they don't really get out and talk to people very much, but they lurk on the internet. And there's all kinds of web forums where they can kind of feed off of each other's pessimism, right? They feed off of each other's pessimism. They catastrophize. And so socialism, by giving these folks real jobs and real opportunities, giving them a decent education system, not leaving them in that state of permatine, not granting them the dignity of adulthood, would resolve a lot of those problems as well. So that's my answer to an interesting question of how socialism and communism would help incels. So there you go. All right. Reasons for market socialism triumphing over Soviet-style socialism. Well, the reasons that I would give are this, right? That not everything can be done in a state-run industry, right? State-run industries are very good at running steel. State-run industries are very good at doing scientific research. State-run industries are great for healthcare. State-run industries are good for power plants. State-run industries are very, very good at meat packing and things like that. However, there are some fields of life where you need a desire to please the customer. For example, a hotel, right? For you to have a really good experience at a hotel, the people working in the hotel need to have an incentive for you to come back, right? Restaurants, in order for you to really like the restaurant, there needs to be an incentive for you to come back. The people working there need to be working to try and make you happy. So having the government run steel mills is fine. Having the government run hotels having the government run healthcare is fine. Having the government run hotels and restaurants is not so good. On top of that, there are a lot of people, individuals, who want to have their own idea. They want to do things their own way. They want to have their own store. They want to have their own restaurant. They want to have their own hotel. And unfortunately, in the Soviet-style system, there's not room for such people. Okay? Right? And this is the false dichotomy we're constantly given. They say capitalism is people being creative. Capitalism is starting your own store. No. Go to Vietnam, go to China, go to Venezuela, go to Nicaragua. All kinds of people have their own store, right? In Nicaragua, they have a micro entrepreneurs program. China has a vast market sector, right? And that that there are some things like the marketing of consumer goods, like the service sector, where in order for quality services or quality products to be created, you need a desire to please the customer. It can't be like the government just assigns, all right, in sector B12 we need 13,000 toys. You can't, doesn't work that way. The government can't make toys, right? You need somebody who's interested in pleasing kids and interested in selling toys to make toys, right? The government can't run hotels and restaurants, but the government can control hotels and restaurants. The government can control toy companies. The government can control high-tech firms that make new apps, right? The government can regulate and control them, and it can own the major centers of economic power. It can control the lending of money. It can control the airlines and the banks and the health care and the steel mills and the mass production of agricultural goods. The state can control the commanding heights, and it can heavily regulate the private sector, but no, right? There was a shortage and there was problems in terms of consumer goods in the USSR. Absolutely. There was problems in terms of things like restaurants, right? And such stuff like that. You need some things to be in a situation where you're trying to please the consumer, but you overall cannot have profits in command. You can't have profits in command. That's capitalism. But when the economy overall is forced to work in the interest of public good, when there's a 5-year economic plan, when there's central planners, pushing credit in and out of the economy, controlling the major industries and commanding heights, and then you have a market sector, it works much better. There's a lot of people in the USSR who felt very stifled. A lot of potential of human creativity was wasted in the Soviet Union. There were a lot of people who had a lot to contribute, but because the state government bureaucracy didn't have a place for them, they were not pushed forward, and that's a big problem. It's a big problem they had in the USSR that contributed to their downfall. All right. Best books on market socialism. When China Rules the World, that's a very good book by Martin Jakes, I believe. That's the name of it. You can go read Deng Xiaoping's actual writings. There's a good book called China, what is it? The China Wave, The Rise of a Civilization State. That's very, very good. There's a number of books on this topic that you could read. My goodness. The folks at Monthly Review magazine, they put out a very good critique of really existing socialism. That I particularly enjoyed, actually, that kind of addressed this topic. They put out a very good book. I don't agree with them about China, but they put out kind of a critique. You can read what Marta Harnacker is a very important intellectual for the Bolivarians and Bolivarian socialism. Marta Harnacker. She's one of their ideological leaders. It's a woman. And she is very, very important, Marta Harnacker. So there are a number of good books on this. Okay, you're asking me, why does Lyndon LaRouche focus on Britain? Okay, so first of all, I'm not a follower of Lyndon LaRouche. I've read some of his material, but I don't agree with him on a number of things. And I am good friends with some of the people in the LaRouche movement. And, Daniel Burke, who runs for Congress in New Jersey, and he is with the LaRouche folks, and he is anti-imperialist, and he's anti-war, and he's a great guy. But he's not a Marxist. And I'm not a LaRouchian, but we're friends, right? And that's the thing. You can talk to people with whom you disagree. The LaRoucheites are very pro-China, pro-Russia, very anti-war. They very much believe in economic growth. They're very opposed to Malthusianism. They want the government to take action to aid working people. So there's some good stuff about them, but, their worldview is different from mine. They reject Marxism, and they favor what they call the American system. They follow the German economist Friedrich List, and they and some other intellectuals and economists from around the world. That's them. That's me. They have their view. I have mine. I've spoken on panels about Syria that they put on about Syria. I'm very proud to do it. I would do it again. I'm not ashamed to be associated with them. They've spoken on panels I've spoken on panels about China with them before. But their view is not a Marxist view. I believe LaRouche was kind of a Trotskyite Marxist in the 70s, but in the 80s he kind of adopted a different view. And that's that. That's who they are. I would happily interview them again. I'm hoping to interview them once again pretty soon. They're good people, but their view is not my view on a number of issues. So go ask them. Go ask them about why they think that, because I don't represent them and I don't agree with them on a number of points. So if you want to know why they think something, go ask them. Tweet at them, right? Go ask them. Don't ask me, because I am here to speak for me, not for them, okay? I just gave you pretty much my understanding of their worldview, but they might disagree with that. They might even say I'm misrepresenting them. I can't accurately represent their worldview because it is not my view, right? People often ask me this, and it's like a trap that I fall into. The same with Dugin, right? I'm not a Duginist, okay? I do not agree with Alexander Dugin's worldview, but people claim that because I talked to Dugin, that makes me a fascist. So then I have to explain, okay, what Dugin believes, and then that sounds like I'm a Duginist because I'm explaining his worldview. Well, I don't want to explain Lyndon LaRouche's worldview because that's not my worldview. So go talk to Lyndon LaRouche. I don't want to explain Alexander Dugin's worldview because I'm not a Duginist. Go talk to Alexander Dugin or somebody from the Eurasian movement if you want to know what they believe, okay? I'm a Marxist, a 21st century socialist. I know what I believe. Ask me about it. How to engage with the rise of anti-LGBT agitation. Oh, okay, that's a good question. Okay, so there you go. All right. Anti-LGBT agitation in the East. All right. All right. Okay. Next question. All right. Greed and corruption. Why would socialism be any better? Well, because socialism is rationally organizing the economy. You're going to have corruption in any system. You're going to have greed in any system. But socialism makes it so greed is not the command of the economy. Production is not carried out simply to satisfy human greed. There is an overall strategic plan from the state, right? It's not like socialism, and what is the basis of greed? The basis of greed is scarcity. Right? If there was vast abundance and everyone was guaranteed to have whatever they wanted and needed, there wouldn't be any greed. The basis of greed is scarcity, okay? And greed is the basis of capitalist production. Production is organized to fulfill the greed of capitalist owners, to maximize their profits, right? The general law of capitalist accumulation. They must keep expanding. They must reinvest, constantly be reinvesting for more and more in order to survive. Well, socialism is not just making everyone be moral or good. Socialism is the idea that with a rationally planned economy, without the irrational greed being the commanding force of production, we can have a better society. So when you're asking me, isn't there greed and corruption under every system? There is. But socialism is about organizing production to serve society, and that's the difference. James Baldwin's CIA connections. Read Joel Whitney's book. He wrote a very important book called Finks, How the CIA Tricked the World's Best Writers. And in it, he talks about how James Baldwin was covertly supported by the CIA because he was an anti-communist advocate of black liberation. And Paris Review was the magazine that published and promoted his writings. And James Baldwin's writings were widely promoted by Paris Review. And Paris Review, it is revealed to have been a CIA publication. Does that mean James Baldwin's a bad person? No, it just means that he wasn't a communist and that the imperialists, for some reason, found his ideas to be useful. And that is a matter of fact. And I talk about the Congress for Cultural Freedom. It is a fact. The Cultural Cold War, the documents are public. It's not a secret. But a lot of these breadtube people, because they can't deal with this fact, they just laugh it off. That's a crazy conspiracy theory. That never happened. And, what do you say to these people? It's like, okay, all right, well, there you go. If you want to say that, Google it. I'm sorry. It is a matter of fact that the CIA propped up and funded certain leftist voices in order to isolate and marginalize others. That is a historical fact, okay? Some things are true, some things are not. This is true. They just want to sit there and go, that's not real. So there you go. All right. Why did socialist countries handle COVID better? Because in a socialist country, everyone's on the same page, right? There's one central planner of the economy, and it says we're going to shut down, and it means for real. In the United States, There are all kinds of different competing capitalist interests that all had a different agenda and wanted different things. And as a result of that, during the pandemic, you had different agendas, different forces pushing on folks to go one way, go another way. It was chaotic, right? And with socialism, with central planning, you're all on the same page. Vietnam did an amazing job handling COVID. China did an amazing job handling COVID. Kerala, the section of India run by the Communist Party of India Marxists, did an amazing job handling COVID. The United States did a miserable job. Italy did a miserable job. Many countries did a miserable job handling COVID, but the socialist countries did a pretty darn good job. All right, next question. What is anarcho-syndicalism? Anarcho-syndicalism, all right, it is a school of anarchist thought. Okay, so we have to first... All right, among people that want to overthrow capitalism, there are three schools of thought. The first are social democrats. And social democrats believe that capitalism just kind of naturally turns into socialism one step at a time. They're reformists. They believe, one day we'll have free health care, one day we'll have better union laws, and the next day they'll nationalize something, and one step at a time, gradually, capitalism turns into socialism. The movement is everything, the goal is nothing, socialism is nothing but the sum of reforms. That's social democrats. Communists believe there is a struggle to seize political power. Communists believe that the working class must take hold of the state and create a new state, the dictatorship of the proletariat, and with control of the state, create socialism. Communists want to seize political power, right? Social democrats want to gradually evolve society. Communists want to seize political power. Anarchists reject all politics. They don't believe in reform through voting. They don't believe in reform through establishing a workers' government. They reject all politics, favoring only direct action and the construction of voluntary autonomous communities. There are different schools of anarchism, right? There's a lot of anarcho-terrorist kind of, Bakuninism and Kropotkin, and there's also anarcho-syndicalism. And anarcho-syndicalism is the belief that it's simply the struggle in the workplace between the employer and the employee, and that there will be a great general strike where the employees refuse to go to work and eventually seize control of their individual factories. But their individual factories will be autonomous, that their factories will sell their goods to other factories. Their factories will, that the workers will eventually seize their factories, and those factories will be autonomous. Syndicalism is the belief that it's only the union struggle, only direct action, only the labor struggle on the job, no politics. Syndicalism is the rejection of politics. Anarcho-syndicalism is the idea that there'll be some kind of great general strike, and then every factory is autonomous and sells its good to other factories. That's anarcho-syndicalism. So those are generally the schools. So anarcho-syndicalism is one school of syndicalism. There are other schools of anarchism: anarcho-feminism, anarcho-primitivism. There's anarcho-communism, which is like an attempt to have Marxism without Leninism, etc. So there you go. All right. Next. Socialism with Chinese characteristics, the Belt and Road Initiative, and its influence on liberal reformism in the United States. Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of the liberal reformists know that the United States, that the infrastructure is crumbling, number one, and that around the world, a lot of countries want to do business with China. They want to do business with China, but because China gives them infrastructure and does a better job. And they want the United States to get its own infrastructure together, and they want the United States to offer countries better infrastructure. But you'll notice we're not capable of pulling this off, right? Biden gave a great speech about fixing the infrastructure. Hasn't happened yet, right? Trump talked about fixing the infrastructure. Hadn't happened yet. Obama talked about fixing the infrastructure. Hasn't happened yet. Trump started a whole plan to counter the Belt and Road Initiative around the world. Didn't happen, right? Biden's now talking about, we're going to build infrastructure to counter the Belt and Road Initiative around the world. It's not happening. This is just like during the Cold War. During the Cold War, the New York Times liberals would always say, the problem is that the communists give people health care, and the communists give people literacy programs, and the communists give people schools. And if America could just do what the communists do, then no one would be a communist. That was the New York Times liberal editorial page. If we could just do what the communists do, well, then no one would be communist. Well, the problem with that is that there's a reason the communists do what the communists do, and there's a reason that we ain't. Right? We do what we do because we're a free market capitalist country. The communists do what they do because they are capable of it. They have a government of action. And as much as the liberal reformists, in their minds, if we could just get our shit together and start building infrastructure in the third world and get our own infrastructure in order, why then China, their economy wouldn't be beating us, countries wouldn't be trading with them around the world. It would be that easy. But we can't do it because we don't have a government of action that fights for working families, number one. And number two, we can't do it because we're imperialists. We don't want the countries we trade with to develop. That would hurt the power of the big multinational corporations. All right. DOP in the United States, right? Establish. All right? So there you go. There you go. All right. Okay. How could the USSR have been preserved? It couldn't have. The problems of the USSR developed over the course of 70 years. It became very, very rigid. And the problem was it needed to reform in order to stay in existence, and it could not reform. And I've answered this question. It comes up on almost every live. Someone super chats me and asks me this, right? If the USSR could not bend, so it broke. If you're unable to bend, you break. And that's what happened. The USSR could not reform itself, so it broke. And that's the strength of the Chinese Communist Party, is that it is constantly evolving and changing. And that's the difference. Okay. Why is AFRICOM expanding? Because the U.S. imperialists realize that their military presence in Africa is a way to threaten China, and it's a way to intimidate countries, and it's a way to try and make countries trade with them. And as China's economic presence in Africa expands, the U.S. imperialist military presence in Africa is expanding. So there you go. All right, and Africa has lots of resources that are very valuable. Africa is a very rich continent. The people of Africa are poor, but the continent is very rich. It has lots of oil, lots of natural gas, lots of very rare and valuable minerals, that are very, very valuable in our computer economy. But the people there are poor because of the export of capital, because of imperialism. So there you go. Does socialist patriotism negate black nationalism? No. No, it does not. I would maintain that all progressives, all anti-imperialists should support black nationalism, right? Black people have the right to be nationalistic. Black people have the right to not be supportive of the United States and to say that they don't consider themselves Americans. That communists should view the right of black people to be black nationalists, the right of Chicano people to be Chicano nationalists, the right of indigenous people to call for separation. That is their absolute right. That is their absolute right. And it's you have to be careful though, right? So if the black nation wanted to break away from the United States, we would support their right to autonomy, their right to self-determination. But we can't go around advocating that because right now, the majority of black people don't want to separate from the United States. And they're not going around saying that. So if we white communists, were to go around telling black people they should separate, that would sound like segregation. It would sound like racism. It is up to the oppressed people whether or not they want to integrate or separate. That is their choice. A colonized people have the right to integrate if they choose, and the right to separate if they choose. That is their right to self-determination. All right. What's the difference between a mixed economy and market socialism? Norway, Sweden, these are mixed economies. It's capitalist economy, it's production for profit, but a heavy amount of government involvement. A welfare state, some government-run healthcare, etc. But it's still a for-profit economy, just the government is involved to make a welfare state. There's a lot of taxation, etc. A market socialism, on the other hand, is when the state controls the means of production, but there's a private sector. There's a private sector, and it's a big difference, right? Mixed economy is still production for profit with heavy state involvement to carry it out and to stabilize society with a welfare state. Market socialism is production for social use with the state controlling the means of production, but there's a market sector and they use market mechanisms to do it, right? The difference between capitalism and socialism, I've said this on many lives and I will say it again. If production is carried out for profit, for capital, that's capitalism. If production is carried out for the good of society, that's socialism. And that is the difference between capitalism and socialism. Under capitalism, production is carried out for profit. Under socialism, production is carried out for society. The root of socialism is the same root as society. The root of capitalism is the same root as capital. Why is production carried out? What are the property relations? If production is carried out for the good of society, that is socialism. If production is carried out for profit, that is capitalism. Joan of Arc, Leslie Feinberg. Leslie Feinberg, who I had the honor of interacting with on a number of occasions and working with for the, in like 2007, 2008, 2009-ish. I think she got sick around 2008, 2009. I got to work with her a little bit when I was in the Workers' World Party. She mentored me a little bit, and she worked with me on some of the articles that I wrote for the Workers' World newspaper. She is the author of a number of books about the transgender experience in the United States. The book that I read most intensely of hers was a fictional novel she wrote called Stone Butch Blues, about the life of a trans man, basically, and the experience of a trans man. But Leslie Feinberg also wrote a book called Transgender Warriors, which is a history of trans people throughout history. And in that book, she talks about Joan of Arc and how Joan of Arc wore men's clothing. Joan of Arc was a cross-dresser, I guess you could say. She wore the clothing of a man. And that was one of the reasons given for her execution, was for wearing the clothes of a man. And she did a lot of research on that topic. I know Sarah Flounders and some others, folks in the Workers' World Party, helped her research intensely the life of Joan of Arc. And, Leslie Feinberg interpreted the execution of Joan of Arc as being a manifestation of transphobia, because Joan of Arc was gender nonconforming. She wore men's clothes and she led men into battle. She was a woman, but she wore men's clothes and she led an army of men into battle. And that's why she's listed in what is a book that, Leslie Feinberg, I don't think Leslie Feinberg ever went to college. I don't think she had a degree, but she's loved by academia. And she's a tanky. She was definitely a tanky if there ever was one. She was a tanky. She was a hardline communist. And her writing is the foundation for a lot of LGBT academic theories about trans stuff. So there you go. And I honestly, that's not a topic I know very much about. I really, really don't know very much about it. I did read Stone Butch Blues. I haven't read Transgender Warrior. But, I heard her lectures. I heard many of her lectures at universities around the country. And so there you go. Okay. All right. The Chinese Communist Party's position on the national question. The Chinese Communist Party's position on the national question, they do grant autonomy. The Uyghur region is autonomous. It's the Tibet Autonomous Region. There are other national minorities in China that are granted autonomy. And the Chinese Communist Party has done a lot to subsidize and promote Tibetan Buddhism. They have paid for the construction of all kinds of mosques in the Uyghur regions. China very much sees it as its responsibility to support national minorities. There may be instances where they could have done a better job. There are things that they may have done in relation to these national minorities that are not good. But ultimately, the CPC supports the right of self-determination and autonomy, and has largely granted that in Tibet and the Uyghur regions and for other national minorities. What movies do I recommend? I don't know. I've been to the movies twice now since the end of the pandemic, and neither of the movies that I saw were particularly good. We saw the movie about the woman who went to Ireland. It was kind of a romance movie. We saw that, and I don't even remember what the other movie we saw was. Neither of them were very good. I don't know. There's a movie theater in my neighborhood. Sometimes my wife and I'll go there to, pass time on a weekend afternoon or something like that. But there you go. Okay. All right. Racism and imperialism. Why is Australia allowed to be part of the first world, but Haiti is not? Well, that's a very, very good example. Australia is a nation of white settlers, largely, right? Let's be real, right? Haiti Haiti is an island in the, it's half of an island in the Caribbean. The other half is the Dominican Republic. And it was, there was a slave revolution there. They broke their chains and established a country. It was a big divide among the founding fathers of the United States, right? Alexander Hamilton and some others. What is Leninism? All right, some others, they had the idea that the U.S. government should recognize Haiti and do business with it, but the rest of the founding fathers were against it, and France forced Haiti to pay reparations, to France for the crime of breaking their chains and becoming free from colonialism and free from slavery, Haiti was not a white settler country, right? It was not largely settled by white settlers. It was a country of people that were brought to Haiti as slaves. And so, yes, it was never allowed to be a first world country. It never was, part of the first world club, right? Australia was part of the British Commonwealth, it's part of the first world, but Haiti is not. And the same could be said, things aren't as bad in Jamaica as they are in Haiti, but Jamaica is not part of the first world. The Dominican Republic is not part of the first world. The Caribbean islands, that are largely populated by the descendants of people who were brought there as slaves, as well as the indigenous folks, they are not part of the first world. Whereas the countries that are populated by white settlers are, right? And that is the legacy of colonialism and the legacy of racism, right? If you were brought to a place as a slave, you didn't have any rights. Barbados, another great example. You didn't have any rights. You didn't get to own any property. You didn't get to own any property. Whereas white settlers went there, they set up farms and they set up their own industries and they developed in a completely different way. The way that Cuba and Haiti and the Dominican Republic and Barbados and Jamaica and St. Lucia, the way they developed, and the way the countries of the way Australia or the United States or Canada or New Zealand, the way they developed is completely different. The way white settlers developed and the way enslaved people developed, even after they broke their chains, are completely different. So there you go. Okay. Haiti on the ground. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking with Danny Shaw. Danny Shaw was in Haiti very recently, and he is going to give us a great interview and an update about what's going on the ground in Haiti. Someone's asked me, is a peaceful transition possible? Haiti is not at peace right now. There's a lot of fighting going on. There's been rebellions and chaos in the streets for many months, and it's only intensifying. There's talk of sending the U.S. military in. UN troops are apparently going in. It's a very intense situation in Haiti right now. A very, very intense situation. So, it's already a violent situation, right? So, there you go. But tomorrow we're going to talk to Danny Shaw. Keep your eye out for that interview. Danny will have a lot to say about it, I'm sure. All right. Are the capitalists getting dumber? Is the populace getting smarter? Well, look, I think that social media has been a big game changer because nowadays people can just take out their phones and learn things they wouldn't normally learn. Social media has granted a lot of people access to information. A lot of people don't know things now, but it's voluntary. They could know them if they wanted to know, but they don't. And so you don't know a lot, it's because you don't want to know a lot. It's not because you don't have access. Right? And that is a big game changer in all classes, right? It used to be the rich had much more access to worldly information. And, a low-income person might be just as intelligent as a rich person, but they just wouldn't have access to the information. And they wouldn't have access to education. They wouldn't have access to the libraries. And they might have a big thirst for knowledge. They couldn't pursue it, whereas a rich person might, be more educated and more informed as a result of their life circumstances. But now, social media, is a big game changer. The internet is a big game changer. And I would argue that there's a lot more knowledge among the population, but at the same time, you still have a layer among all sections of society that doesn't want to know for whatever reason, right? There's rich people who don't want to know. There's low-income folks who don't want to know. But there's a lot of low-income folks who do want to know. There's a lot of rich people who do want to know. And that's I guess, my answer to that question. I'm not gauging the intelligence of people throughout the classes. Bill of Rights in a socialist America. I cannot imagine a socialist America that would not have freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and freedom of religion. The American people would never accept a socialist government that did not grant them their civil liberties. Gus Hall was always very clear about Bill of Rights socialism. And that, yeah, I really, really doubt that the people of the United States would ever accept a socialist government that did not have those things. However, it's very likely a socialist society would probably want to ratify a new constitution. But maybe it would be possible through just amending our current constitution. I don't know. Ultimately it'll be decided through the course of struggle. I'm not here to design a blueprint. I'm here to offer a way forward. But yes, I cannot imagine that we would ever have a socialism that didn't have freedom. There you go. Oliver Cromwell and his parallels with the United States. Okay, so Oliver Cromwell, he was the leader of in the English Civil War. He was the leader of the anti-royalists. The Roundheads, they were called. He was a Puritan, a deeply religious man who was an agitator. So in England, you basically had a fight between the Parliament and the King. The Parliament and the King were at odds. So the King, his supporters were the rural folks, the remnants of feudalism, the Cavaliers, they were called. And it was urban folks, that were fanatically Protestant religious, that didn't like the Church of England, that didn't like Catholics, that really hated Catholics, that were very radical and read the Bible for themselves and very vehemently believed in certain very, very strict religious principles. The Puritans, the religious fanatics, the levelers, those were the folks who fought on the side of the Parliament. And because the Parliament, it was fighting the bulk of the country, right? The bulk of the country was in the countryside and was still rural, and the Church of England was the state religion and such. They had to build an army of fanatics to defeat the king. And so it was the Puritans, the Roundheads, the levelers, these kind of radical religious Protestants who were the basis of the parliamentary army in the English Civil War. Now, you're asking about parallels with the United States. Well, so I guess the thing is, Oliver Cromwell, he led the army of the Parliament to eventually behead King Charles and execute the king. He was proclaimed Lord and Protector, and he was the leader. And after his death, he was declared to be an extremist. And, the monarchy was restored after he died. And Oliver Cromwell, pretty much in Britain, he's considered to be a big pile of, he's not remembered very well. He's remembered as a traitor to the country who killed the king. The execution of King Charles is considered by the Church of England to be a martyrdom. There is a painting of Oliver Cromwell that is in a British university, and there's curtains near it, because whenever a member of the royal family is in the area, they close the curtains over it. Now, there's one British historian who I particularly like. His name is Thomas Carlyle, and he defends Oliver Cromwell. And he says that Oliver Cromwell was a revolutionary and a progressive for his time. But almost all English historians, for the most part, except for like Marxists, almost all of them have a very, very negative picture of Oliver Cromwell. Now, Marxists would argue that he was a bourgeois revolutionary, bringing forth the bourgeois revolution. But aside from Marxists, the general view of Oliver Cromwell is that he was a radical, crazy extremist who killed the king and hurt the interests of the country overall, and was a bad ruler and became a military dictator, the Lord and Protector. He was a religious extremist, and he ruined the country, and he was awful. Well, he was awful to the Irish people. He committed mass genocide against the Irish. He was viciously anti-Catholic. So I'm not going to say the man was all good. But what parallels are there to the United States? Well, the American Revolution, right, was a bourgeois revolution. It was the American, the House of the Burgesses in Virginia, right, the Continental Congress, all these bodies of property owners, slave plantation owners, but also New England businessmen, etc., wealthy folks. And they created an army of fanatics to carry out the American Revolution, right? They unleashed Patrick Henry, and they unleashed Thomas Paine, the agitator agitator of the American Revolution, and who wrote Common Sense. And yes, they created an army of fanatics, but just like the English bourgeoisie, they turned against those fanatics, right? A lot of the American revolutionaries didn't even support the French Revolution. And there was something called Shays' Rebellion afterwards. A lot of the folks who had fought in the American Revolution were convinced they were going to get some land, and they didn't get the land. They'd fought the revolution on the basis of believing they were going to get some land. They didn't get the land. So there you go. I mean, there are certainly some parallels that the bourgeoisie, in order to overthrow feudalism, during the French Revolution, you had the Thermidor and eventually the rise of Napoleon. And that often the bourgeoisie, in order to take power, unleashed kind of fanaticism and then became afraid of their own fanaticism. And so you can see that parallel. And the fact that Oliver Cromwell, they couldn't have overthrown feudalism in Britain without him. He was essential, what he did, but he's now considered to be an awful person in English history because of that. So there you go. All right. Okay. What do I think of jobs that are not productive? So this is the thing. Karl Marx, in his writing, he talks about how in his time in Britain, 50% of the proletarians in Britain did not produce surplus value. They were not involved in production on the factory floor, right? They worked on the estates. They took care of children. They worked in stores. They weren't creating products and creating surplus value. But under capitalism, the amount of workers who produce surplus value, the amount of quote-unquote productive workers, is constantly diminishing. And under capitalism right now, that's what we're seeing, right? The rise of the service sector. I started out talking about, the capitalist crisis of overproduction and all of that. That's the whole point, folks. That's what I've been on here railing about, is the number of workers that do quote-unquote productive labor is constantly being diminished. And we're constantly having the rise of the service sector, other jobs. Look, right now, I'm making profits for YouTube. YouTube, you're watching this, they're getting advertising revenue. They're taking a chunk of the super chats, right? But I am not creating surplus value. I'm not creating a product here, but I'm making profits for YouTube. And the rise of this kind of stuff is very, very much the nature of capitalism as it moves ahead, right? The percentage of the proletariat that is involved in productive labor is constantly diminishing and becoming a lower and lower percentage. Okay? Now that said, as far as artists are concerned, right? Artists have an important responsibility. Their job is to improve society with their art, right? That is their job. Their job is to make their audience better, to make us think more, to teach us, to make us more responsible citizens. Capitalism corrupts art and makes it about commodity. It's commodified, right? It's just like, they're making, you want to make candles, you want to sell as many candles as you can make. So you figure out exactly how many candles, how you can sell the most candles. Well, when art is like that, when the capitalist is so determined to maximize his profits, he doesn't want to take any risks. He finds a few crass tricks he can get away with. That's why Hollywood makes the same movie over and over and over, right? And that's why grossness has taken the place of multiple things, right? Nowadays, shock value, grossness has replaced humor. It has replaced horror. It has replaced action. Instead of coming up with a really funny joke, you just shock everybody and they laugh. Instead of coming up with a very scary plot that has you on the edge of your seat, they just, show you a bunch of blood and gore and scare you. And that takes the value of it, right? And instead of having a very exciting movie that's very exciting with a very exciting plot, they simply, have a lot of violence and cars blowing up and stuff and shock you, right? And again, it's because it's not a risk. If you take the risk of doing the real work of creating art, there's a chance it may not work. And that's why we have the pornographication of art, right? Sex sells, heavy emotions sell, but rational, well thought out creative things don't always sell. It's a risk to do rational, well thought out creative things. And that's why our art is largely sex and violence and heavy emotions, because all of those things sell. And that is a problem, right? That's a problem. We need to get back to the notion of statecraft and the artist as having social responsibility. All right, next super chat question. Anti-LGBT agitation in the East. Well, look, I think that what this really gets down to is that capitalism is a very destabilizing force. It's a very destabilizing force. Capitalism leads to economic insecurity, neoliberalism, and unemployment, and all of that. And that the family is often, in developing countries, the family is far more important. People take care of each other in ways they don't in Western countries, right? And that the family is a way that people in the insecurity and the poverty and instability of developing countries, the family becomes much more important. People's family, they learn, they have a loyalty to each other in terms of their family that we don't have in the West, right? That we just don't have. People take care of each other in ways that they don't in the West. And because of that, anything that is seen as kind of tampering with the family is going to be viewed with much more suspicion than in a Western country, okay? And if, the notion of gay marriage, the notion of transgender stuff is going to be viewed with more suspicion because the family is much more central in the lives of people in the developing world than it is in the lives of people in the first world. Okay, and that's really what it's about. So when people's lives become more economically stable in the developing world, when economic development comes in, it's likely that people will then be more open to hearing about LGBT stuff and be less threatened by it. Again, this is an economic process. Does this mean that people will stop being bigots just because there's economic security? Of course not. Does this mean that I'm putting aside some of the vicious homophobia and anti-gay bigotry we see in the developing world, and I'm saying it's all okay? Oh, they're poor, it's okay. No, I'm not saying that. No, there's awful things done to LGBT folks in the developing world, and that's not okay just because they're poor, and it's not just going to go away simply because of economic development. But overall, there is an economic link, okay? There is an economic link, right? And that when the family is when people are very, very dependent on the family, it becomes kind of a sacred institution, and so they're going to be very highly suspicious of things like gay marriage, of things like trans, etc. All right. How do we establish the dictatorship of the proletariat in the United States? Well, my friend, we don't go around trying to establish the dictatorship of the proletariat in the United States. I've explained this on other lives, but I'll explain it now. There is a 3-stage process of transitioning. Stage number 1 is the building of a revolutionary coalition around a revolutionary program, right? There needs to be a broad, united front created around an economic program, right? In Russia, that broad, united front was created around peace, land, and bread. In China, it was redistributing land to the peasants, defeating the Japanese invaders. There are many other programs that have been enacted. We have our economic program, our CPI. That's what we're doing. We're developing the program, right? Our economic program, Fusion City, Sandino Zapata. This is our program. And if you build it, you build a coalition, a broad coalition around the program, around what you want to do. Not around the ideology. You have your ideology. Some people might have their, but around the program, you build a vast coalition. Then you obviously want a government that would enact that program. Okay? You want, obviously, people in office who will then enact that program. But in order to enact that program, the nature of the state must change. Right? In order to actually have peace, land, and bread, you need a new government, right? In order to actually have, a government of action that fights for working families, you have to change the nature of the state. If somebody got elected president of the United States and started to implement the economic solutions we're talking about, they would be up against the FBI, they'd be up against the Pentagon, they'd be up against the CIA. So they would have to change the nature of the state. They would have to, right? They would have to start changing the nature of the military, of the policing organizations, because they would be facing opposition from them. So in order to stay in power, a revolutionary coalition would have to enact the dictatorship of the proletariat. And once the dictatorship of the proletariat is enacted, then you can have socialism. the word dictatorship is a word, it's not a good term, okay? Because dictatorship, you think of dictator. You think of a guy at a podium screaming, "I'm the dictator, you must listen to me." Well, dictatorship in this sense, what we live under now is called the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. The people who control the means of production, the big corporations and banks, the rich people, they dictate and they run society. They control. What we want is the rule of the people, the rule of the working class, the broad masses, and that's the dictatorship of the proletariat. That's all it means, right? We have the rule of the capitalists. We want to replace it with the rule of the workers. And unfortunately, the way it was originally translated is dictatorship, and so that's the way it is. But there's a three-stage revolutionary coalition around a revolutionary program, moving in to change state power, and then from there enacting socialism. You're at, and I guess you're hinting at the possibility of violent revolution. We would prefer a peaceful transition to socialism. We would prefer that all three of these steps are done peacefully. But the imperialists and if there is a violent revolution, it will be the decision of the imperialists. It'll be the decision of the ruling class, because working people don't want violence. Working people don't like violence. There's too much violence in working people's lives already, with crime, domestic violence, police brutality. It's working people that are sent to fight all these wars in the military. Working people don't want violence in their lives. They want peace in their lives. And we want peace as well. And if there's a violent revolution, it would only be because the capitalists, over the course of millions of people being brought into the political process and organizing peacefully, because the capitalists won't tolerate it and become violent and suppressive, and people have no choice but to defend themselves. All the revolutions of history, the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, have been acts of self-defense. When people had no choice, they were facing slaughter, facing being killed. They had no choice. They were up against a wall, facing death. It was kill or be killed. And they had a violent revolution to not be killed. It was an act of self-defense. And that's what you must understand, okay? That violent revolutions, when they happen, they are acts of self-defense by people who have no choice. All right? And what is Leninism? Last super chat. What is Leninism? Leninism, you had Karl Marx and his teachings. Leninism is the understanding of what imperialism is. It's the understanding of the right of nations to self-determination. It is the understanding of the concept of the vanguard party. It's Lenin's additions to Marxist theory. That's what Leninism is, right? It refers to the way that Lenin adjusted Marxism for the 20th century. And it was the official ideology of the Soviet Union. They started referring to the Bolshevik Party, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, said that its ideology was not just Marxism, it was Marxism-Leninism. And on that note, folks, we're going to be done for tonight. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night. Good night. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action